Okay, Henry is the most advanced client I'm working with for sure. He's about 11% body fat. He is 37 years old. He's been training for 20 years. He is very, very strong. He's very, very fit, and lean and muscular. He wants to, he's a model. So his primary goal, and by his behavior you can tell, is aesthetics. And so he tracks his macros currently. Just to briefly go on that, it's he eats a lot of similar things day after day. With that, he wants to learn how to control better, get a handle on his behavior on the weekends when being out with friends. And Henry is a social person for sure and wants to maintain that lifestyle. And an interesting thing about Henry is sometimes the thing he'll say in a consult contradicts like his behavior in a way. He's a challenging client to describe the path of long-term thinking in fitness. And I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but it's an observation of a learning opportunity for me. And maybe it's how to communicate with already very advanced athletes in their strength ability and their just fitness ability. Describing to him, a 6-week phase, what progression looks like, whether it's tempo or volume or intensity. He seems to have a lot of questions. I think he doesn't feel satisfied with some of my answers. He's used to programs that he finds online, like off the shelf bodybuilder workouts that don't have necessarily, maybe they have progression. I'm sure they have progression, but they're not customized for him, and that's the part that isn't really resonating that much. So I think it's just an ongoing challenge for me to learn more about how to communicate better with him. And maybe he just has really high expectations because he's already an advanced athlete and wants to really see why this is beneficial. Yet he wants fast results. So I think he is geared toward short-term thinking, and I like to think in the long term. So maybe it's that. Maybe it's a little bit of the rub there. Henry wants a bigger chest muscles, for example. Now, some of maximum muscle hypertrophy and size is somewhat genetic, and I explain that to him. And yet there are definitely things we can do with training to increase the muscle mass total, right? And I explain that to him as well. So, it's a little more complex than just lifting more. And I think that's where Henry gets caught up. It's in his volume. He trains 6 times in 6 days or 7 days. I'm not sure. I think it's 8 workouts. That's what I'm trying to say. 8 workouts in 7 days. So one of them's a Barry's camp where a Barry's boot camp where he'll also lift that day. And I'm this is a recipe for no recovery, not adequate recovery, based on the type of workouts you're doing, I think. Unless he were to do some type of sustainable aerobic piece earlier in the day or later in the day, whatever, separate from his gain section. If he were to do a sustain separate from a gain and it was a map 10, map 9, map 8 situation, maybe map 7, but if he were to progress through that. But I'd like to see him have a rest day, a programmed rest day, and then for sure go through phases and then have deload weeks where he's taking some weight off and giving his body a break. So more isn't always better. And I think explaining that to him is also a challenge. It's counterintuitive for him, which I understand. It's counterintuitive for a lot of people to think that more isn't always better in training. But I'm trying to communicate that, and I think I'm doing the right thing there. So let's talk about nutritionally. I'm increasing his intake, just a little bit. He's eating just under like 300 grams of carbohydrates, which is a lot for most people, but he's fit as hell and wants to be bigger. So increasing his carbohydrates and increasing his protein, particularly not getting enough protein around his post-workout. So his lifting is usually followed up by like a small breakfast, and I want to see at least 40 grams of protein in that meal. And then, I mean, his structured meals other than that are pretty solid. I think another thing is just ensuring he's the type of guy that can handle closer to a gram per pound of protein, even though, you know, the science shows 1.2 to 1.5 or 2 grams per kilogram, which I follow with clinical patients who have like obesity, for example, to some extent, because they're not eating enough protein at all. But at the 1 pound per gram, he wants to get more mass. So that's what we're going to go toward, at least that amount. And there's even room for more. So protein, every meal is a priority. He's eating very regularly. I mean, he's tracking his macros on an app. So I think MyFitnessPal. So doing that, and on the weekends I'm having him journal how many drinks he has, just to bring awareness to it. And we're going to start there as far as his wanting to control his social behavior, just to bring awareness to what is actually happening there and starting to figure it out, what's happening and how we can make it more moderate, potentially. Training, he is at the point where he's so strong, he's so fit, he can do body part focused training. So he can do a like anterior chain focused lower body day that's mostly quads and tibialis muscles and core, and is very focused on that. He can have a hinging day where it's anterior chain, lower body, and upper body, you know, core and the anterior chain of his legs. So squat, press, hinge, pull with core mixed in, and potentially a fifth day that's more full body. If he wants to replace berries, that's more like squat, pull, hinge, press in one day, just to kind of have a not as intense day, because he's so strong. He could probably use that day to move around, but not fatigue too much, because he'll be going so intense, so deep into his central nervous system on the 4 days proper per week of training, squat, pull, hinge, press, and maybe a full body day. As he progresses, I'm considering if he could even move toward like squat and then upper body, like horizontal push and vertical pull, and then switch it up, so vertical push, horizontal pull, and maybe even separate those days up a little bit to make it a 5 days, 6 days per week training, if he's at that level. But we're going to start with squat, pull, hinge, press, and he is going to be going more intense, so lower volume, 5-6 reps on the major lifts like deadlifting and squatting, and those patterns. He can go right into front squatting, he can go right into deadlifting, straight bar deadlifting, clean grip, and he can do split squats, he can do rear foot elevated split squats, he can do not Olympic lifting because he has no experience with it, but he can do a strict overhead press. I can teach him a push press at some point. That'd be fun for him. And he can do just complex lifts, and he can do high weight at those lifts. It's pretty impressive, so from what I've seen so far. And so you'll see it in the programming, but overall, we're looking to promote muscle hypertrophy. Another fun thing I'm doing with him, which I learned from my mentor, Bree, is I'll have him do low volume and high intensity on, say, a front squat, and then a higher volume, lower intensity, with a little bit more time under tension on like a leg curl or leg extension, which is going to help with that muscle hypertrophy and that muscle endurance as well as the strength piece. And so I'm incorporating some of that as a superset. So A1 would be front squat, A2 on a quad focus, lower body day, squat day, leg extension at, a lower intensity, higher volume, more like 12 to 15 reps. And we'll see how he enjoys that, if he likes it. And that'll be fun for me to program to and learn from. So I don't think I'm missing anything on Henry. He's a learner for me. I'm learning, and he's aware of that, and he's on board with it. So being fully transparent on that, and I'll leave it at that for Henry.